Hello everyone and welcome to the Utopia of Nerd News. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Adam.
And today we're doing a review on the new version of Great Gatsby. Now, for this story, just to give a little bit of background, if you haven't ever watched or read the book Great Gatsby, it is about a guy named Nick who is telling the story about Gatsby. And Gatsby is this rich guy who is in love with Daisy. And she's already married to Tom. So that's kind of a backstory to it, just to kind of give a little bit of what characters are where and stuff. So the reason why I didn't feel very strongly about this film is because some of the choices that were made in this film. First off, going into the characters and the actors, how did you feel about them?
Well, the first one, probably the one that's named after Gatsby, I thought Leonardo DiCaprio was alright.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a really good actor, which helps, but I don't think this is a role that was designed for him in the first place. I think maybe that's why it wasn't really good. But I do think as far as an acting perspective goes, I think he did a good job of kind of slowly progressing the character from the completely composed person who has control over everything to when he kind of starts to lose control, and you can see the gradual steps. So he does a pretty good job.
I would agree with you. I do agree that Leonardo, though I agree that the role was probably not for him, he did a good job. And I would also say, and I think we agree on this, that Tobey Maguire's
Nick.
Yes, Nick, he did a fairly good job as well. I was a little wary at first because I was like, oh, I'm not sure if he's going to do well, but he proved himself to a certain extent.
I think he did a really good job. My only complaints are a few times earlier on in the movies, I guess he tried to act with his eyes more than anything else, and he's just not that talented of an actor. It just came off as kind of weird, but outside of those few early spots, I thought he was pretty solid. What were your thoughts on Carey Mulligan?
Alright, so Carey Mulligan, I love her as an actress. She is a pretty darn good actress, but her portraying Daisy just didn't go over well with me. If you've watched the film with Robert Redford, Daisy in that film is very spontaneous and very giggly and kind of ditzy, but she's still, she thinks. But in this role that Carey Mulligan portrays, she wasn't ditzy or very, very giggly, like spontaneous.
Right, I agree. She was the weakest part of the acting for the movie.
I think so.
I think that's a pretty solid thing to say. Yeah, she's too serious. Like, during the end of the movie, without going into details, but going into the end of the movie, like, the whole premise is the fact that she's a carefree kind of, spirit. She's so random, very changing, and it didn't mesh well with the words that were being said at the end of the movie. It was really contradictory.
Well, even in the beginning, I mean, there's a part in the movie where, even in the book, where Nick goes over to Daisy and Tom's because, he just moved to West Egg and he's going there because they're having dinner together. She acts kind of depressed, but then, she finally says, oh, I'm paralyzed with happiness, and then she's happy. Like, she should have been giggly and stuff. I mean, she was a little bit, but just
nowhere
didn't work.
Near to the degree. She needed to be over the top.
Yeah, it just wasn't
that's
there.
Such an important character for the story, the entire story aspect, and it has to be an over the top, crazy, kooky kind of character, and she was serious for the most part.
Well, I mean, it's understandable that she would be serious because, she doesn't like her life right now, but Daisy's one of those people that hides her feelings. She acts giggly. She tries to portray that everything is fine when it's really not. And so I just don't think she tried to hide that as well as what she should have. Like we were saying, she should have been more carefree, and it didn't work.
So, in a slightly happier note, at least for me, my favorite actor for their role in this movie was Joel Edgerton. I thought he was awesome as Tom. He's really proving himself to be a pretty good actor. I think he's been in a lot of kind of smaller stuff where people wouldn't recognize his name, and this probably won't be any different, but this is probably my favorite performance I've ever seen him do. He did a really solid job as being kind of the control freak, over-the-top kind of man character. They first introduce him, as kind of the jock. He's on the horseback. He fits this character really well, and I wasn't sure the first time I heard he was taking this character that he would be that over-the-top jock kind of guy, because most of the time he's the nice guy, but he did a really good job at being this particular character. I was really impressed by him.
Yeah, I think he did a pretty good job, which, it's great when actors do amazing jobs or good jobs, but there's always the directing and writing that can always stump the
Before
the
we
movie.
get to this, there's one more thing with the acting I have to say.
Okay.
The two of the pivotal characters in the story, the mechanic and his wife,
Oh, yes, the Wilsons.
they were barely touched on in the movie. Barely. Like, they needed to be in this a lot more than they were. Like, they were kind of barely introduced in the beginning, and then they don't come back until their big important role in the story. I was really kind of confused by that, to be honest. They have such an important part as far as the turning point to the story. Nothing. I mean, they were really shallow characters. Not necessarily saying the acting was,
Right.
but the story just kind of sucked them out of it when they shouldn't have been at all.
Right. I mean, even though in the book they don't appear a whole lot, like Daisy and the bigger characters in the storyline. But, yes, they didn't go into, Myrtle and how she met Tom and how she was so infatuated and that, that he's her first sweetie, that she's ever had, and how she just, hates her life because she thought that George Wilson was someone else than who she married, and it really didn't go into that, so you really didn't get the understanding why she was so wanting to be with Tom, or why she was so emotional when she saw, them go by and he didn't stop for her.
And even some of the parts that were kind of more originally in there, that were still in the movie, just seemed kind of thrown in. Like, all right, we have to get these people their FaceTime. And here's their few lines, we'll say them as we're walking through.
Yeah.
That's really what it felt like for me.
Yeah.
So, now going on to the directing and the writing. What are your thoughts on the CGI in this movie?
Oh my gosh! Can you get any more CGI'd? I mean, besides, Green Lantern. But really, the water, the houses, the cars, everything seemed to be CGI'd. Like, you couldn't find some manor in New York or some other place that looked like New York that you could use. I mean, come on! This isn't like a superhero movie or something that you really need the CGI for. I understand it can be less expensive, but oh my gosh!
To me, like, you were complaining about the mansions, and yes, they could have easily picked up a mansion. I mean, come on, it's a big budget movie, right? And it would have made it look a lot nicer, but even more so than that, the water. Water looks better in video games than it does in this movie. Like, they have these really big intro and outro kind of settings with the water for the movie, to start it and to end it. And they have it on this completely fake-looking water that looks like it belongs in, like, a sci-fi movie. Maybe even worse. I mean, it is really bad. For a high-budget movie, it's atrocious. It completely takes you out of it. The cars, when they're driving by, they're just nothing but CGI moving. It looks fake, and this movie didn't need that.
No, and even some of the people looked fake. I mean, when you use too much CGI, people tend to start to look fake.
The music, the direction they decided to take with the music in this, what were your thoughts?
Oh my gosh. There's just so much going on. Really? Like, we couldn't have just gone with classic music. I mean, back then in the 1920s, they had great music. I mean, there may be some people who wouldn't enjoy it as much because they're not, lovers of the old classic music, but But really adding dubstep into one of the scenes for the party, I understand it's a party scene, but really do we need dubstep? And I love dubstep, but come on! And then Jay-Z's songs and ones that just didn't fit. I was so disappointed.
To tell you the truth, I would have been okay if it was like one song at like the big party. In fact, the small kind of mini party they have, I was kind of okay with it. I didn't hate it, but it keeps coming. Like, have you ever heard a movie have so many unoriginal songs play throughout the entirety of it, outside of maybe a dancing movie? Like, they just keep coming. And it's like, they don't need them. All they need is a little piano for this part, and it would have been more emotional.
Yep.
Like, they just keep going. They just ran with it because Jay-Z was a producer on the movie. And he's like, hey, I own a record label. Let's get all my big songs on the movie. That'll make this better. And it doesn't. Songs with words should really not be used a lot in movies because people are speaking. It clusters up the sound waves. All you need is a good sound to go underneath it.
Yep.
That's what, Lord of the Rings has, Pirates of the Caribbean had. These good sounds that help amplify what's going on, not clustering it up.
It adds more emotion when you're not trying to listen to words of a song. It just adds more emotion when you just have that music and you can hear the talking of the people or just whatever emotional scene is going on. I mean, but anyways, I will get off my music soapbox.
One thing, I'm going to say this right now. I've noted about Baz Luhrmann, the director of this movie, beforehand, and I've never really been a fan. And this movie really hasn't changed my mind. He does these a couple times throughout the movie where he kind of takes a bunch of stuff up in the story and just kind of chops them up and shoves them all together into these clips, these little clips, and they have somebody talking over them, and they do that a couple times, and I don't like that. And I also didn't like the words popping up all over the screen all the time. There's just so many things that just seem kind of weird,
It had almost made me wonder if he'd ever, really directed a movie before because I guess it almost reminded me of maybe a music video or something where you'd have words popping up and then they'd fall or whatever to the music. I mean, yeah.
He's definitely an eccentric director. And I can see why they might try and go for some kind of a different angle for the movie. But the stuff that he does, they take you out of the story too much. Again, going back to the music and the words, it's too much. It's too immersive breaking.
Yep.
The adding of the psychiatrist.
It's just a little weird. I mean, I can understand where it came from because he might feel that way, but it just I don't know. It takes you out of it, like he's saying. It's just too much.
Honestly, I wasn't a big fan. I know you weren't either.
Nope.
As far as people I'd recommend this to, I can't recommend this to people who like the original material, the source material for this, because even though they stick with the story, some of the really pivotal scenes I didn't think were done well enough for what they should have been. The previous stuff we mentioned, I wasn't a fan. I wouldn't say I'm let down because I saw this coming.
Yeah.
I told her from the start, I was like, the moment they had Baz Luhrmann, this is going to suck.
But I tried to keep my hopes up. I tried. Because I'm a total fan of the classic, but
Yeah, so I'll recommend this to people who like movies like Australia.
Or if you've never even heard of Gatsby before or read the book or seen the other movies, definitely it'd probably be a great movie for you guys. You'd probably enjoy it.
Probably not if you don't like bad CGI. That's our video. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned. Tomorrow we will have a review for the Robert Redford version of the movie. And the day after that, Sarah here will have a book review off The Great Gatsby.
Yes.
So stay tuned for those. That's our video. Down there is the comment box. You can like it if you feel the need. We'll see you guys next time.
See ya.